Charlotte Whitmore's coffee went across the little girl's dress, and the whole cafe turned to look. The CEO of Whitmore Capital did not apologize. She looked the 7-year-old over, then looked at her black father and told the room that people like them didn't belong in a place like this. When Malcolm Brooks asked her to apologize to his daughter, she laughed and ordered her bodyguard to throw them out. The bodyguard crossed the room. Then Malcolm knelt to hold his daughter. His sleeve slipped and the man saw the tattoo on his forearm. He stopped. He stepped back. He refused the order. One tattoo and the whole room changed sides. Who was this quiet father, really? Malcolm Brooks wore long sleeves in July, and his daughter had never once asked him why. Saturday mornings belonged to the two of them. They walked 6 blocks to a cafe on Harlan Street that smelled like burnt sugar and steam, and Zoe ordered the same thing every week: hot cocoa, extra whipped cream, and a cup she could hold with both hands. That morning, she had opinions about the marshmallows, which she believed should number 9, and the barista had rounded down to 5. 5 is a rounding error, she said. Malcolm looked at her over the top of his coffee. Where did you learn that? From you, on the phone. You say it to the man who does the numbers wrong. He laughed, and it was a good laugh, the kind that surprised him every time. 3 years ago, he had wondered whether he would ever make that sound again. Amara had been gone since the spring Zoe turned 4. Near the end, when the morphine made her honest, she had taken hold of his left forearm. Not his hand, her fingers closed over the ink he kept covered and made him promise. Not for anyone, not for anything, not even for her. He had never broken it. The tattoo stayed under cotton in every season, and the man it belonged to stayed under something heavier. What he did now was freight consulting, unglamorous work a man could do from a laptop at a kitchen table while a child did her summer worksheets across from him. Most of it came from one place. Kessler Freight ran 240 trucks out of a yard by the river, and for 2 years, Malcolm had been the reason their fuel line stopped bleeding. The contract wasn't large, but it was steady, and it let him be at the door at 3:15 every afternoon. And to Malcolm, that made it the best contract in America. Kessler had been bought some years back by an investment group downtown. The name had appeared once on a letterhead and meant nothing to him. Charlotte Whitmore came in at 9:20, and the room adjusted around her the way rooms did. She did not notice it anymore. Whitmore Capital had $11 billion under management, built out of nothing anybody would have bet on. Her mother had cleaned houses in the good neighborhoods and come home smelling like other people's lemon polish, and Charlotte had gone to high school with the children who lived in those houses. She had learned there that people decide about you in the first second, and that they decide by looking down. She had been 15, standing in a hallway, when a girl named Whitney Marsh glanced at her shoes, heels worn to the nail, one sole gone soft and gray, and said nothing and smiled and walked on. Charlotte had thought about that smile for 22 years and had built an empire partly to make sure no one would ever aim it at her again. She had also picked up a habit she was not aware of. Charlotte Whitmore looked at a person's shoes before she looked at their face. It took less than a second, and it had never once failed to tell her where they stood. She ordered a large black coffee, took it standing, and answered a call about an underperforming portfolio company. Zoe wanted a napkin, and Zoe was 7, so she went for it without announcing the expedition. Charlotte turned mid-sentence, the way a person turns when arguing with someone who isn't in the room, and her arm came around with the cup in it. The coffee went across the front of Zoe's dress in one dark stroke. It was hot, but not scalding, and the sound Zoe made was small and startled. Malcolm was up before the cup had finished emptying. He pulled her back by the shoulders and got the wet fabric off her skin, soaking his left cuff through to the elbow, and checked her chest, her hands. Red, not burned. She was fine, standing very straight and very still, the way children do when they have decided that crying would make it worse. "You're okay," he told her. "You're okay. It's just a dress." And Charlotte Whitmore looked down. She did not mean to. It was reflex 22 years old, faster than thought. Her eyes went past the ruined dress to the scuffed sneakers, one lace knotted where it had broken and been retied, and something moved in her chest that she had no name for and no intention of examining. It arrived as heat and came out as contempt. "You should watch her," Charlotte said. Malcolm straightened up slowly. "She's 7. She was going for a napkin. Children run loose in places like this because nobody teaches them the difference." Charlotte's voice was not loud. That was the thing people would remember afterward. It was pleasant, the voice of a woman reading a report aloud. This is a 100-year-old room. There are places designed for families like yours with the plastic chairs and the paper cups, and everyone would be more comfortable. The barista stopped with a pitcher halfway to the steam wand. Families like ours, Malcolm repeated. You know what I mean. I'd like to hear you say it. Charlotte smiled, and it was Whitney Marsh's smile, and she had no idea whose face she was wearing. I mean, this is not the room for you. I think you knew that when you walked in. Most people can feel it and have the grace to go elsewhere. Somebody at the window table set down a fork. Malcolm did not move. What he felt was not new, and that was the exhausting part of it. A grip he'd had a hand around since he was 14 years old. He breathed out through his nose and counted the breath. Then he looked at his daughter. Zoe had gone quiet in a way he hated. Her chin was down, her hands holding each other in front of the coffee stain, her shoulders drawn in. She was making herself smaller, folding down to take up less room in a place a stranger had just told her she didn't belong in. She was 7. It had taken 40 seconds to teach her that. Ma'am, Malcolm said, and his voice came out level. The dress doesn't matter, I don't want your money, and I'm not going to argue with you about the room. Charlotte waited, already bored. You spilled coffee on my daughter and then told her she doesn't belong here. He said it plainly, the way a man reads out a number. I'd like you to apologize to her, that's the whole thing I want. Charlotte Whitmore laughed. It was a short laugh of real surprise, and it did more damage than anything she had said because it was the sound of a woman discovering that the furniture had spoken. You'd like me to apologize? She said. To her, not to me. Do you know who I am? No, ma'am. That's the part I find remarkable. Charlotte set the empty cup on the counter and turned to face him properly for the first time. You don't know, and you're still standing there. There are people in this city who wait a year for 20 minutes of my time, and you're a man in a wrinkled shirt asking me to kneel in front of a child because her feelings got hurt in a coffee shop. Her name is Zoe. I'm sure it is. Charlotte took out her phone. What is it you do exactly? You have that laptop look. Look, contracts consulting, some little thing you do from home. Malcolm said nothing. Freight, I'd guess, she said. Something with the yards, and whoever pays you has a parent company, and that company has a board, and I have spent my entire career sitting on those boards. Understand that this is not a threat. A threat is a thing that might happen. Watch. The call lasted under a minute. She spoke to someone named Ray in the tone of a woman confirming a lunch reservation, his name, a pleasantry about his wife, and then 2 sentences. There was an outside consultant working one of the freight lines. She would rather that expense went away this quarter. She did not know Malcolm's name. She did not need it. The text came 4 minutes later while he was still standing in the same place. Ray Halloran, call me when you get a minute. The email came 6 minutes after that, 4 lines long, thanking him for his service, effective immediately, sent from an address he had exchanged Christmas messages with for 2 years. The cafe was completely silent. Malcolm did the arithmetic he had spent a lifetime learning to do fast. Rent 6 weeks of runway. Zoe's summer program prepaid through August. He could walk out right now, take his daughter to the park, get on the phone Monday morning, and rebuild it in 90 days if nobody else got a call from a woman like this. That was the door. It was 4 steps away, and it cost nothing but leaving. He looked down at Zoe. She had understood more of the last few minutes than a 7-year-old should, and she was waiting to find out what her father did when someone said a thing like that about them out loud. She would remember whichever one he chose. Malcolm put the phone in his pocket. Ma'am, he said, I'd like you to apologize to my daughter. Charlotte Whitmore had been in rooms with men who ran countries, and she had never met one who would not move. She had taken his income away in front of 40 people, and he had put his phone in his pocket and asked the same question in the same voice. The sentence had not gone up at the end. It had not begged. It sat there in the middle of the cafe like a stone in a road. You think this is leverage? She said. You think if you stand there long enough with the child in front of you, I'll pay something to make it stop? I told you I don't want your money. Everyone says that. It's the opening position. Charlotte moved a step closer, her voice as pleasant as it had been from the start. No ring, no wife at the table on a Saturday morning. So it's just the 2 of you, the money is thin, and here comes a woman in good shoes with a bad temper. You can already see the number. 50,000 to be quiet. Am I close? The barista had rehearsed the sentence 3 times in his head. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave, and then his eyes went to the black card on the counter and the name printed across it, and he thought about his rent being due on the 1st. He turned back to the machine. He would think about that decision for a long time. At the window table, a woman in running clothes had her phone at chest height, screen dark to the room camera live. By the door, an older man filmed openly and did not care who saw. "You keep using her," Charlotte said, gesturing at Zoe without looking at her. "That's the thing I actually find distasteful. If you had a case, you'd make it yourself. Instead, you put a child in the middle of the floor and wait for the room to feel sorry for her." Malcolm did not answer. What was happening inside him did not show, and that was the whole discipline of it. Somewhere under the count of his breathing, an older machine had come online and had been offering him solutions ever since, calmly the way it had been trained to. Left hand to the wrist, turn her into the counter, she goes down without a mark on her, and this ends. He knew exactly how it would feel. That was the problem. He knew the weight of a person going where he put them, and he knew what Amara had seen in his face the day she made him swear. She had not been afraid of what he had done overseas. She had been afraid of how quiet he got afterward, how the quiet was not peace but a hand held over a mouth. Not for anyone. Not for anything. Not even for her. He counted the breath out long and slow, and the machine went back down where he kept it. "Nothing to say," Charlotte observed. "That's a strategy, too." "It's not a strategy, ma'am. I've just already said the only thing I came here to say." Zoe tugged the hem of his sleeve twice the way she did at the doctor's office, and when he leaned down, she put her mouth close to his ear. "Daddy, can we go home?" she whispered. "I don't like it. It's okay. I don't need her to say sorry." And there it was, the thing he could not let stand. Because she did need it. She had spent 40 seconds learning that a stranger could look at her feet and decide about her, and she was already doing the next part, volunteering to want less, making it easier for everybody by being smaller. He had watched his own mother do that in department stores. He had promised himself at 14 that no child of his ever would. Malcolm crouched eye to eye with his daughter, both hands on her arms. "I know you don't need it," he said. "You're right. I'm asking anyway, and it isn't going to take long, and then we're going to the park, and I'm going to lose at the monkey bars again." Something in Zoe's face came back up. Only a little. It was enough. Charlotte watched the two of them on the floor, and the feeling arrived again. The one with no name, the heat in the chest, and this time it came with a hallway, a locker door, a girl's shoes, a smile, and no words at all. She turned her head sharply as if the room had gotten loud. "Grant," she said. He had been standing near the door the whole time, and almost no one had noticed him, which was the job. Grant Sullivan was 61 years old and built like a filing cabinet, gray at the temples, hands folded low. He had spent 13 years doing this work, the last 9 for Charlotte Whitmore, who did not like conversation in the car. That suited him. Before all of it, there had been 26 years in a line of work he did not discuss, including with his wife, including with the doctor who asked whether he had experienced anything he would describe as traumatic. "Yes, ma'am," Grant said. "Remove them. They're disturbing the other customers." It was the kind of thing that got said in 100 rooms a day, and the answer was to walk over, stand close, and say something quiet that made leaving feel like the person's own idea. Grant had done it hundreds of times. He crossed the floor without hurrying. Malcolm heard him coming and did not turn around. He kept his eyes on his daughter's face. "It's all right. He's just doing his job. Look at me, not at him." Then, shifting his weight to stand, he reached out and straightened the strap of Zoe's dress where the coffee had pulled it down, and the wet left sleeve slid back along his forearm and stopped at the elbow. Grant Sullivan's boot came down and did not lift again. It was not shock. Shock is fast and loud, and what happened to him was neither. It was closer to what happens when a man hears a piece of music he has not heard since a specific year and finds his eyes wet before his brain has supplied the reason. The ink was old and pushed out at the edges the way old ink goes, a design that meant nothing to anyone who had not earned it. Beneath it, 4 digits, and beneath the digits, a word that had been taken out of the world in 2009 along with everything attached to it. His hands came unfolded at his sides. He was aware of the espresso machine and of a chair leg scraping somewhere behind him. He was aware mostly of being 43 years old on the floor of a compound with his femur in 2 pieces watching the light go out of the doorway, understanding that the bird was on the pad and not coming back because there were 9 of them and only 4 had walked, and the arithmetic had been done by people much further away. And then the doorway had gone dark again because somebody had come back through it. A commander half his age who had already made it out once. "Grant," Charlotte said from the counter. "Now please." He turned toward her and the room saw his face, and that was when the last of the conversations in the cafe died. "Ma'am?" His voice came out wrong, and he took a moment to get it under him. "No, ma'am." Charlotte's head tilted. "Excuse me." Grant looked back at Malcolm, who was standing now, his expression gone very carefully blank, already pulling the wet sleeve back down over his arm with 2 fingers too late. The old man's spine did something it had not done in years. "Sir," Grant said, "I didn't recognize you." Malcolm shook his head once small, the way you tell a man to stand down. Grant said the rank anyway. He said it clearly, and it was not a rank anyone in that cafe had heard spoken out loud outside of a movie, and then he said 4 numbers and half a word the beginning of a name with a classification attached, and stopped himself so hard his jaw clicked. "I'm not allowed to talk about that," Grant said to the room to nobody. "I can't tell you what it was. I'm not going to." His hand came up and pointed unsteady at a man in a wrinkled shirt with a child holding his belt loop. "I'm standing here because of him. That's all I've got. I'm standing here because of that man." "Grant." Charlotte's voice had lost its pleasantness for the first time that morning. "Whatever this is, it isn't your business. I asked you to do one thing." "Yes, ma'am," he said. "You did." He took the earpiece out and set it on the counter beside her card. The wire coiled itself and everybody watched it. "I quit," Grant said. "I'll bring the vehicle back this afternoon and leave the keys with the desk. I'm sorry to do it like this." At the door, he turned back and looked at Charlotte Whitmore the way a man looks at a road he has driven a long time without checking where it goes. "Ma'am," he said, "you told that little girl she doesn't belong in a room." Then he went out into the street, and the door swung and the bell over it rang twice. Nobody in the cafe knew what had happened. They had heard a word they could not spell, and half of another word, and they had watched a large old man come apart on his feet, and the not knowing was going to sit in them like a splinter for the rest of their lives. 4 phones had it. All of them were still recording. Malcolm took his daughter's hand and walked out. He did not go to the park. He went home, put the dress in cold water, made grilled cheese at 10:15 because it was the thing Zoe liked best, and let her watch 2 movies. He did not check his phone until she was asleep. By then, it had been up for 11 hours. The version that traveled was the one shot from the window table. Good audio clean angle. Charlotte's face fully lit. Somebody cut it to 2 minutes and 40 seconds and titled it with the sentence about the room. It was on 3 platforms by noon and on the morning shows by Tuesday. Malcolm felt nothing about the parts that involved him. What he felt about was the sleeve. Because the internet did not care about the coffee. The internet cared about the old man who had come apart, and within a day it had gone frame by frame and found the reason. Somebody stabilized the shot, somebody enhanced it. By Wednesday, there were forum threads arguing about an insignia and an account with no posting history that put up one comment correctly naming a unit that had been folded into another in 2009 and then deleted itself an hour later. Malcolm had spent 7 years being nobody in particular. He had built his whole life around the freelance work, the small clients, the long sleeves in July. He was not hiding from an enemy. He was hiding from himself, and now several 100,000 people were looking directly at his arm. On Thursday, his phone rang with a number he had deleted years ago and never once forgotten. The man on the other end was called Danvers. He had retired as a colonel, and he did not ask how Malcolm was. "You've seen it," Danvers said. "I've seen it. Then you know we're going to have a conversation about paragraph 4. I haven't said a word. Not a reporter, not a lawyer, not a neighbor. I'm aware. I'm also aware that Sullivan said 11 syllables in a coffee shop, and it's now sitting in a thread where some of the guessing is 80% accurate." Danvers's voice was not unkind, which somehow made it worse. "You confirm nothing. You deny nothing because denial is confirmation with extra steps. If you're asked, you have no comment about your service. That includes the woman who runs your daughter's summer camp, and it includes a witness stand. Understood?" "Yes, sir." "I'm sorry about the rest of it," Danvers said and hung up. Across the city in a building with a view of the harbor, Charlotte Whitmore's week was being conducted mostly by other people. The board met on Tuesday without her, then with her, then without her again. 2 of her largest limited partners issued statements containing the word reviewing. Warren Pike, who had chaired her board for a decade and once told her she was the most impressive person he had ever hired, sat across from her on Thursday and used the phrase temporary step back 4 times in 11 minutes. Charlotte fought all of it competently, the way she had fought everything. Then she went home. Her apartment was on the 40th floor and had been photographed for a magazine, and there was nobody in it. Around midnight, she opened the video, which she had been careful to watch only in conference rooms with lawyers narrating over the top of it. Her own voice came out of the phone speaker, thin and reasonable, saying a thing about Grace. She got to 22 seconds. At 22 seconds, the camera drifted to keep her in frame and caught the child at the edge of the shot, not crying, not upset in any way a lawyer could point to, just standing very straight in a stained dress with her hands folded in front of her chin-down eyes on her own sneakers. Charlotte knew that posture from the inside. She had held it in a hallway at 15 with a wall at her back, and she had spent 22 years and $11 billion making sure she never had to hold it again, and it had never once occurred to her that she might be the one putting other people into it. She stopped the video. She sat in the dark for a while. Then she started it again and watched to 22 seconds and stopped it. She did that 4 times. By the second week, the story had stopped being about Charlotte Whitmore. It became about a little girl, and it happened the way those things happen without anyone deciding. At the summer program, a boy named Bryce found the clip and played it on the bus with the volume up. After that, the older kids called Zoe by the name of the video, which was not a name at all, and one of them tried to be nice about it and asked her to do the part where she looks down. A woman in the cereal aisle photographed her without asking, then put a hand over her own heart and said, "God bless you, sweetheart," and walked away. On the 9th day, a man with a shoulder camera was waiting outside the rec center at pickup and crouched to Zoe's height with his microphone out before Malcolm got to him. Malcolm moved him off the sidewalk without touching him. It took everything he had. The changes came in the order such changes come. She stopped mentioning it. Then the answer to how was it became fine delivered to the floor. Then breakfast became a negotiation and then a bowl of cereal going soft while she sat in front of it. Then on a Saturday morning, she would not put her shoes on. Not a tantrum. She sat on the edge of her bed and said she did not feel like going anywhere, and when Malcolm said the park, then ice cream, then the aquarium, she said okay to all of it and did not move. He sat down next to her, they stayed like that for a while, and then Zoe asked the question she had been carrying for 2 weeks in the small, flat voice of a child who has already decided what the answer is. Is it because I went to get the napkin? Malcolm did not trust himself to answer immediately. No, he said. No, baby. None of it is because of you. But if I stayed in my chair, Zoe. He took her hand and turned it over and held it. Listen to me. A grown woman said something ugly and grown people with phones did the rest and not one single part of it is yours. She nodded because she was 7 and he was her father, and he could see perfectly well that she did not believe him. He put her to bed at 8. Then sat in the dark kitchen and finally looked straight at the thing he had been walking around for 2 weeks. He had stayed in that cafe for her. He had stood on that floor because he could not let his daughter learn at 7 to make herself smaller. He had been right about that, and he would be right about it for the rest of his life, and the price of being right had been paid entirely by her. She had not been humiliated once. She had been humiliated in a coffee shop, then on a bus, then in a cereal aisle, then on a sidewalk with a microphone in her face several 100,000 times because her father had refused to walk 4 steps to a door. He put his head in his hands, and the count of his breathing did not help. The envelope came on Monday, hand-delivered by a courier who needed a signature. The letterhead said Vance Whitaker Pruitt, and the first page named Malcolm Brooks as defendant in an action for defamation, intentional interference, and civil conspiracy. The theory was laid out over 19 pages, and it was, he had to admit, beautifully built. His work for Kessler Freight had been terminated for documented performance reasons in a review cycle begun months earlier. There was an exhibit attached, and the dates were real because there had in fact been a routine review because there always was. He had known who Charlotte Whitmore was before he sat down. He had positioned himself and his child chosen the confrontation. And coordinated with another party present in the cafe, Grant Sullivan was named on page 11 as a disgruntled employee to manufacture a viral event and extract a settlement. The relief sought was $2 million and a public retraction. It was not built to win. Malcolm understood that by the second reading. It was built to change the subject, so the man in the video stopped being the person it happened to and became the person under investigation. And it came with a trap in it. Because the whole thing came apart the instant he answered one question. Who are you, Mr. Brooks? Who were you before the freight consulting? 20 minutes of testimony, 1 unsealed record, 1 call to a colonel named Danvers, and every jury in America would look at the plaintiff and see a woman who had humiliated the man who used to go back through the door for people. He could win enormously. And to do it, he would have to stand up in a public courtroom and become out loud in front of cameras the man he had buried 3 years ago with his hand in Amara's, the man she had held by the forearm at the very end over the ink, and made him swear he would never let out again. Not for anyone, not for anything, not even for her. He would have to break that promise on a stenographer's record, and every hour of it would put his daughter's face back on every screen in the country for another 6 months. Or he could say nothing as a colonel had instructed him to, as his wife had asked him to, and lose. And let it enter the permanent record of the world that Malcolm Brooks had used his own child as a prop for money. That was the version Zoe would find someday when she was 15 and typed her own name into a search bar. He sat with the 19 pages in front of him. No contract, no anonymity, no way out that did not cost the one thing he had left. Grant Sullivan came to the apartment on a Thursday with his hat in his hand. He stood in a kitchen with crayon drawings taped to the refrigerator and apologized twice for the café as though he had been the one holding the cup until Malcolm made him sit down and put 2 glasses of water on the table that neither of them touched. They talked for an hour, most of it about nothing. That was how men like them talked. Then Grant said, "They named me in it. Page 11. My wife read it before I did." He turned his hat over on the table. "They're calling it a conspiracy. Me and you planning it out. Sir, I've never met you in my life." "Once," Malcolm said. "You've met me once." "That's what I'm telling you, and I can't say a word about it. Not a deposition, not an affidavit, not a call to a reporter. I called the office. They said the same thing to me they said to you." Grant looked up. "So I'm the only witness who knows what happened, and I'm the one man on earth who isn't allowed to open his mouth." The document was still on the table between them. Malcolm had been writing it for 6 days. The declaration in his own name, 4 pages, plain sentences, dates and places, redacted down to almost nothing but enough for a judge to sign an order and pull the rest of it up out of the ground. He had opened the file 11 times and had never once been able to type his own signature block. "Can I ask you something?" Grant said. "You've got a way out of this. You've had it since the day it landed. Why haven't you used it?" "Because my wife asked me not to." Grant let that sit. "She was dying," Malcolm said. "She had about a week left and she was on enough medication to make her honest, and she took hold of my arm, not my hand, right here over the ink." He touched the place through the sleeve. "She said she'd watched me come home 4 times and only 3 of me ever came back. She said whatever I'd left out there I didn't have to go get it, that I could just put it down. And she made me promise I'd never pick it up again. Not for anyone, not for anything, not even for her. And if you sign that," Grant said, nodding at the pages, "you pick it up. If I sign that I stand up in a courtroom and become him out loud with cameras in the hall." Malcolm turned his glass a half-turn on the table. "And I win. That's the part I want you to understand. I'd win so completely they'd write about it. And every hour of it puts my daughter's face back on every screen in this country for 6 more months, and she's 7, and right now she won't put her shoes on." Grant Sullivan sat with a hat in his hands and understood exactly what was being described to him, a man choosing which of the 2 people he loved most he was going to break his word to. "Sir," he said finally, "you know I can't fix this. I know. There's one thing I can do, and you're going to hate me for it." Grant stood up. "I can go talk to her. Nothing says I can't speak to my own former employer. I won't tell her what you did, but I can tell her what happens next, and I don't believe anybody in that building has told her the truth in about 9 years." Charlotte received him in an office she was not technically supposed to be using anymore. On the desk was a memorandum from her firm outlining a litigation timeline of 14 to 18 months. Grant did not sit and said he would only need a minute. "You should have a lawyer present for this," Charlotte told him. "No, ma'am, you should. I'm not here about the case." He held his hat down at his side. "I came to tell you 2 things, and then I'm going home. The first one is that you're going to win." Her chin came up. "He won't fight you," Grant said. "He could. He's got the whole thing sitting on his kitchen table, and it would end you inside a week, and he isn't going to sign it because he made a promise to his wife before she died, and he keeps his promises. So your lawyers are right. You'll take $2 million off a man who does freight routing out of a 2-bedroom apartment, and the papers will say he made it all up, and that'll be the true story from then on. Because the true story is whatever's left standing." Charlotte's face did not move. "And the second thing, I was going to die in a room a long way from here," Grant said. "Everybody who could have come for me had done the math, and the math said no. And somebody came anyway. That's all I'm allowed to say. I'll say it once, and I've never said it to my wife." He put his hat on. You told his little girl she doesn't belong in a room, ma'am. I already said that part. I only came back to tell you you're going to win in case that helps you sleep. He was almost at the door when she said his name. Grant. Her voice was not the cafe voice. 9 years. Did I ever ask you a single question about yourself? No, ma'am, Grant said. You did not. Charlotte sat in that office until the harbor lights came on. Every instinct she owned was telling her what it had told her in the cafe, that there was always a way through, that people broke if you pushed the correct place. She would survive it. Diminished, watched, but standing. What she kept seeing was 22 seconds. It was not a courtroom she was afraid of. It was a small girl with her chin down and her eyes on her own shoes. And the reason it would not leave her alone was that she had been carrying that exact picture inside her since she was 15. She had spent her whole adult life making certain no one would ever put her back in that hallway. She had never considered the other possibility, which was that she had never left it. She had simply grown up and changed which end of it she stood on. Charlotte Whitmore picked up the phone and called her own attorney at 11 at night and told him to dismiss the action with prejudice. There was no press release. Her communications people begged for one and she declined. She asked Grant Sullivan to carry a message instead because there was no one else she could send, and because asking him for a favor after 9 years of asking him nothing was the first correct thing she had done in a month. They met on a Sunday at 7 in the morning before the cafe opened because Charlotte had insisted on one condition: nobody there at all. No lawyers, no cameras, no witnesses at the window table. Malcolm asked Zoe first and told her she could say no and meant it. She thought about it for a whole day and said she wanted to go and would not explain why. The chairs were still up on the tables. Charlotte was already there when they came in, standing in the middle of the floor in flat shoes and no jewelry, and she did not look at anyone's feet. She came forward, stopped at a distance, and got down on one knee slowly so that her face was below the child's. Zoe, Charlotte said, my name is Charlotte. A month ago I spilled coffee on you in this room, and then I said something about you and your dad that wasn't true and was cruel, and I said it loudly so that everybody could hear it. There's no reason for it. I've been looking for one, and there isn't one. I'm sorry, I am very, very sorry, and I'm not asking you to feel any way about it. Zoe looked at her for a long moment with her father's stillness. Are you sorry to me? She asked. Or are you sorry because everybody's mad at you? Charlotte Whitmore had been asked hard questions by senators, auditors, and sovereign wealth funds. Both, she said. I want to tell you the truth, so for about 2 weeks I was only sorry because it cost me things. And then I watched the video by myself, and I saw your face, and after that it was the first one, and it's been the first one ever since. The girl had been carrying something for a month that she could not put down, and it came out now in a voice too small for the empty room. Everybody keeps looking at me, Zoe said. I know, that's my fault too. I didn't do anything, I just went to get a napkin. You didn't do anything, Charlotte agreed. Not one thing. It was me. All of it was me. Zoe nodded slowly. Then she stepped forward and put her hand flat on the kneeling woman's shoulder the way a person does when they have decided something, and she said the thing no attorney in the country could have gotten out of anyone. I forgive you, Zoe said, but don't do that to somebody else. Charlotte made a sound and put her hand over her mouth. Malcolm stood a few feet away with his arms at his sides and said nothing. He said nothing about a compound or a doorway or 9 men and 4 who walked out. Nothing about a rank or a unit or a colonel named Danvers. Charlotte Whitmore left that cafe knowing exactly as much about him as she had known walking in, that he was a man who did freight routing and had a daughter, and that was all he had ever needed her to know. The rest of it she took without using any of it. She resigned as chief executive of Whitmore Capital 11 days later in writing without conditions. The settlement she signed with her own board stripped her of most of what she had spent her life accumulating, and her lawyers told her repeatedly that she was leaving a great deal of money on the table. Not once in any room did she say the sentence that would have softened it. There was more going on in that cafe than anyone knows. She had been handed the one fact that could have made her the woman who happened to insult a hero, which is a far more forgivable woman than the one who insulted a stranger. She never said it. That was the price, and she paid it in full. Grant Sullivan took a job driving a shuttle for a hospital system well under what he had been making and slept through the night for the first time in years. Charlotte moved into an apartment with no view and took a position advising a small fund with almost nothing under management and a great deal of work to do, and no one wrote about her. She was starting again with no comeback story attached, which was the only honest way to start. Malcolm found new clients. 3 of them all smaller than Kessler, which together came out to a little less. It was enough. By September, Zoe was eating breakfast again, and by October, nobody in the cereal aisle recognized her because the world moves on faster than anyone believes it will when it is standing on top of them. The Saturday mornings came back. Cocoa, whipped cream, the ongoing dispute about marshmallows, and then the park. It was a warm afternoon in October when Zoe sat down next to her father on the bench and asked the question she had been holding since the summer. "Daddy?" she said. "What's the picture on your arm?" Malcolm looked out at the field for a moment. He had spent 3 years keeping a promise by covering it up, and he understood now in a way he had not that morning in the cafe what his wife had actually asked for. She had not asked him to hide. She had asked him not to pick the weapon back up. Those had never been the same thing, and he had spent 3 years confusing them. So he did the thing he had not done in front of anyone since the spring Zoe turned 4. He took hold of his left cuff and rolled the sleeve up himself past the wrist, past the forearm all the way to the elbow, and turned his arm over so that his daughter could see the whole of it in the daylight. Zoe leaned in and put 2 fingers on the old ink very gently, the way children touch a scar. "It's a mark," Malcolm said, "for some men I tried to bring home." She thought about that for a while. "Did you bring them home?" "Some of them." Zoe nodded and kept her fingers where they were and did not ask anything else. After a while, they got up and walked toward the ice cream truck at the far end of the park, and the sleeve stayed exactly where it was.